Hi everyone. So usually for these interview videos we would just go straight into it, but as you can see there, we had some issues with me being really blurred for some reason at the start of this video. Not quite sure what caused that, but thankfully it didn't last very long. So I thought I'd do a wee solo intro to this interview. We are speaking to Joe Doyle, who is the Crystal Palace writer for Football London. And why are we speaking to Joe? We're speaking to him about James McCarthy. We know you like these kind of videos, finding out a bit more about a new Celtic signing from someone who knows them well. Let's do it then. I started off by asking Joe about the myth. Is it a myth? About James McCarthy and injuries. Enjoy.
Well, I think his time at Everton really was overshadowed a bit by the injuries. I think I was looking it up earlier and it was something like 90 games or so missed over about 3 years. But of course that was a year of which that was a broken leg, so you can't really do much to account for that. I think during his time at Palace it's been more trying to get back up to speed after that, because it was obviously such a traumatic injury. He wasn't too injury prone at Palace last year. He had a hamstring problem that he picked up when he was on international duty with Ireland in October. And then after that, it was just a bit difficult coming back for him, because by the time he was back, he was third or fourth choice central midfielder. And in Roy Hodgson's team, it was a midfield too. So it was very tough to get into that once you were out of it. And you know, he came back, and James McCarthy and Luka Milivojevic were first choice, and it's tough to get past that anyway. And then when McCarthy picked up an injury in January that ruled him out until the end of the season, Jairo Riedewald came in and he really impressed after that. So it just became a bit tough to see any minutes on a regular basis for him. It wasn't really anything that he did wrong. It was just Riedewald offered a bit more in terms of maybe ball progression, and Luka Milivojevic is club captain, so it's a bit difficult to get past that.
So is that why he wasn't offered a new contract then? He just wasn't in the club's plans?
I think, well, at Palace this year it was pretty extraordinary, really. I think there were about 14 players who were out of contract at the end of the season, from the likes of Gary Cahill, Mamadou Sakho in defence, Christian Benteke was as well, but he got signed up. Really, this season at Palace, it's been all about regenerating and trying to bring down the average age of the squad, because it was the oldest team in the Premier League. And also there were quite a lot of players that they're on quite a lot of money, so they're trying to reinvest that. And I think James McCarthy just really probably had a much better offer from Celtic, I would have imagined, because from what I've heard, a lot of the offers that were going around Palace were reduced salaries, obviously due to COVID having an impact. And then once they were reduced, it would be based more on appearances and that type of bonus. So if you're not going to be one of the main players in the team, then you're probably going to get a much better offer somewhere else. And obviously James McCarthy being a Celtic fan, it looks like an ideal move for him.
Do you think this is a move that he'd been kind of looking for a wee while, the opportunity to come to Celtic, as you say, at a club that, you know, he doesn't hide the fact he's supported us for a long time?
Yeah, I think it has been one that's been certainly on the cards for a long time. I think last summer there were rumours about it, and certainly in January as well. But obviously, I think with COVID, it just made it a bit more difficult for clubs to maybe do any business that they might have done before. You know, especially when he had a contract that was only going up until the end of the season, it maybe didn't make sense for Celtic to make that move back then. But yeah, I think, you know, when you are a player that has that love for a club, then it's probably always going to be something on your mind. I know that he's been spotted in the away end a couple of times at Celtic, so I think when you do have that chance, it does maybe tug a bit more at the heartstrings than others would.
So what can Celtic fans look forward to seeing from McCarthy? What kind of player was he at Palace, and how was he thought of by the Palace fans?
I think he was always extremely hard-working. I think Hodgson described him as like a really model pro and that type of thing. So I think you always know what you're going to get from him in that regard. You're never going to get anyone who's down in tools or anything like that. And especially, again, at a club like Celtic, I don't think you'll see any problem with him in that regard. On the pitch, I think he's pretty good at controlling a game. He did so. I know he didn't have that many appearances last season. It was something like 15 or 16 in the league for Palace, but he played the last 3 games of the season and he looked pretty good. I thought he was decent against Villa at the end of when they won 3-2, and then again him and Cheku Kouyaté started in the centre against Arsenal, and they really held their own in that, and it was 1-1 when he left with about 10 minutes going. And then Palace unfortunately conceded twice in stoppage time at the end of that game. But before that, Palace were really pressing and looking decent in that match, and I thought he more than played his part in it.
We obviously are one of the better teams in the league, and already this season in a couple of matches we've kind of been involved in quite a few bad tackles. Now that's nothing new from a Celtic point of view. I did read somewhere that at Palace he was almost the enforcer, the guy who kind of stuck up for the flair players, your Zahas and players like that. Do you think that's something Celtic fans can look out for as well, that, you know, McCarthy will fight and will protect some of the flair players a bit maybe?
Yeah, I think he's never one to shirk a challenge, certainly. I think he's one of the players, I think, at Palace that you would back in any sort of encounter like that. I think he's never shy and really does stick up for his teammates. I think it was good. One of the things you might not notice when you're at a game with a full crowd, you certainly noticed it a lot last year with the empty stadiums, that a lot of players are more vocal. Like you think about the likes of Jordan Henderson and that on the pitch, he was extremely vocal and it was like noticeable. And then McCarthy is always going on at the referee as well, making the case for his teammates.
Obviously, that's reassuring to hear, Joe, that the fact that last season, you probably won't know this, but we really struggled in terms of making a noise on the pitch. So many nice players, such a nice team to play against, and it's encouraging to hear that McCarthy is going to fight the club's corner, his own corner, and, you know, appeal for penalties and appeal for handballs when last season that wouldn't be happening. That's encouraging to hear that. Do you think he's a better footballer than he's given credit for?
Yeah, I certainly think so. I mean, along with James McCarthy, played really well in a couple of games last season, and they really set the tempo very nicely and can control the game really well. I think against Aston Villa, I seem to recall him making a good interception high up the pitch and creating a chance that was, as quite a lot were at Palace, missed last season, but it really was noticeable how quick he was into the tackle, but not in a bad way, in a proactive sort of way. I think is maybe not appreciated as much as he might have been, just because he was that, again, not getting so much game time. But I think when he does get a good run in the team, you start to see him maybe cool down a bit in that regard, sort of get a bit more used to the tempo of the games and then settle into it really nicely.
Do you think he's going to be a success at Celtic? Now, you've got thousands of people watching this, so no pressure. The positive is that you don't need to come back on the channel in a year's time if he has been a flop. I need to front this up. But what do you think? Is he going to do well at Celtic?
Yeah, I think he'll do really well as long as the expectations match. You know, he's a 30-year-old midfielder now. It's obviously not got so many years left, but I think he does have quite a lot to offer still. I think in that sort of, maybe you might call it an enforcer role, but more of a sort of playmaker from the back, you'll probably see the best of him there. I think you know, he likes to keep it simple. He doesn't like to make the sort of Hollywood passes that a few players will try quite often and maybe hit 3 or 4 out of 10 or something like that. He likes to keep possession and make sure that his team just have the best chance of winning by ensuring that they get the players on the ball more who can affect the game in a positive manner. I think, you know, in that regard, he's a bit realistic about his own capabilities, but it's also just ensuring that the team come out on top more than anything else.
Excellent, Joe. Well, we're looking forward to it. We can't wait to see him playing for the club, and hopefully he's as good as you say, and hopefully he can stay fit as well and can get 30, 40 games under his belt this season. Joe Doyle, thanks very much for coming on, and all the best for this season.
Oh, thanks very much for having me.